Hi, welcome to the Badass Breastfeeding Podcast. This is Dianne, your lactation consultant.
And I'm Abby, the Badass Breastfeeder. And today's episode is brought to you by Rumble Tough. The Rumble Tough Breeze is a top-of-the-line breast pump with a rechargeable battery that fits in the palm of your hand. And today's episode is also brought to you by Milkify. And Milkify is the concierge breast milk freeze-drying service that transforms your frozen milk into pouches of powder that last 3 years. Incredible. But we will hear more from our sponsors later. For now, you can head to badassbreastfeedingpodcast.com and see if you can give any of them your business. If you need anything, check them out because they make this podcast possible. While you're there, scroll down, enter your email address. We'll send episodes straight to your inbox every week. Check out our shop page. We've got cool merch. We are on Patreon. Please join us there. We've got our mini podcast, the extra episodes, our Zoom hangouts. We're having so much fun. We're also going to be in Detroit, which we've been mentioning. On May 7th, Dianne and I will have a table at Babies and Bumps. And we will be doing, I don't know if Dianne knows this. I decided.
Bring it on. Bring it on me.
A live for Patreon, a live hangout with us together.
Oh, yes.
Doesn't that sound
good?
That's
a great idea. Yeah.
So join us on Patreon.
If you all don't know, Abby and I are in different places.
Yeah, we're not together right now.
Yeah.
The last time we were together was when we were at Babies and Bumps in Cleveland, which was like, I don't know.
Years ago.
It was before the pandemic.
Yeah.
We also have our Revolution Parenting episodes on Patreon that we are posting every month. And we're doing our ongoing giveaway. So send us your screenshot of your review from around the internet to badassbreastfeedingpodcast@gmail.com, and you'll get a goodie bag of stickers and empowerment cards. And Dianne has our review of the week. I think I'm done.
And this is a little bit different. This came to me via email. And says, "Hi, I just want to say that I love your podcast and thank you so much for spreading awareness. I wanted to share my story about human infants, our mammal friends, marsupials, koalas, kangaroos, wallabies, etc. When I had my first child, I tried to schedule him, breastfeed, play, then nap. And I tried to get him to nap without my breast, a total nightmare, and he's still my worst sleeper. Between him and my third breastfed child, we got season passes to the San Diego Zoo where I learned about marsupials, or about marsupial births. At birth, they weigh 0.035 ounces and look very underdeveloped. Yeah, that's insane. My God. They crawl their way into their mom's pouch where they latch onto the nipple and undergo their second gestation of 235 days. Yeah. They latch onto mom's milk supply and they do not let go for months. Sound familiar? So by the time I was breastfeeding my third child, I would latch her for anything and everything and call her my marsupial or my little koala. Now, when my mother-in-law says things like, "Is she even eating?" I just laugh and say, "Nope. If only I had a pouch to put her in, though." Anyway, have a nice day. And thanks for letting me share.
I thought that was so fun. We have to add that to everything we talk about because because we know, and we've said this before in these episodes, that humans are some of the most immature born babies, underdeveloped. We are born really early because we used to be, early humans were like hunched over and we had a wide birth canal and we carried our babies longer. And as we became upright, our birth canal got smaller and we birth our babies earlier now and they're underdeveloped. The only thing that we're missing is a pouch, which is why, we call that wearing a baby, skin to skin early, wrapping the baby around you. We call that kangaroo care.
Yeah, for a reason we call it that.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's such a great way to describe that. That is what you're doing. They're just in their next gestational phase, basically. We call that fourth trimester.
Yeah.
So cool.
Absolutely. I know it. It's so cool. It's cool when you can see it in practice, with other mammals. And it's like, wow, that's us because we are mammals.
It is. Yeah.
We're all mammals. Yeah. We do have an episode on the fourth trimester. I'll link that if you haven't listened to it yet. But yeah. So
cool.
today we are talking about daycare situations.
Ugh. I don't even send my kids to daycare, and I'm like grunting about it.
It's hard.
We ask
and
the internet too.
Yeah. And this is another like necessary thing. Like, we're glad that there are people that you can have watch your baby because, you know, a lot of people have to return to work. It's not an option. So having either like a daycare provider or a in-home daycare babysitter or a daycare facility, or whether it could be your family members watching your baby, regardless, it's not you. So it's somebody else that's watching your baby for you while you're at work. And that's so common that not everybody, but a lot of people have to do this. It is just the way of the world.
Yeah, it is. It's just like pumping. It's just a necessary thing that people do in order to, you know, live. Literally pay to live. This is what we do.
And, you know, some people
are a whole thing about capitalism right now, but I won't. I'll spare you all.
And I'll say I was fortunate enough that so when I went back to work, my kids were like 3, and I was also going through a divorce. So that's why I went back to work, because I was going through a divorce, because I didn't have a job before the divorce, and it's a long story. But that's why I ended up going back to work, was because of the divorce. So I was very, very fortunate enough that my mother could take my kids, and we still had things that we were dealing with, you know, like she was wonderful with them, you know, and she did a lot with them. And I was very, very grateful that it was family, but there was, you know, grandparents think they can raise your children the way they raised you. So sometimes there's stuff like that happening. Sometimes there's overfeeding going on as toddlers. It's going to happen. Like the time my mother said, Brandon had ice cream 3 times today. And I'm like, well, who let Brandon have ice cream 3 times today?
How did that happen?
Right. Like, he's 4. Come on. Or he was 4 or 5 or whatever he was, you know. So things are still going to happen even when it's a family member. And that's hard, because you also I didn't want to overstep my bounds, because she was doing this wonderful favor for me. But at the same time, it was like, oh, you have to undo a lot of things as well at the same time. But, you know,
yes. But these daycares, I mean, people are paying a lot of money to send their kids to these daycares. And you need to tell them what the deal is. Because a lot of times they're trying to tell you what the deal is. And it's like, no. And they also have terrible, terrible information about breastfed babies.
Yeah. They don't know your baby the way you know your baby. They don't know your baby's cues. They don't know your baby's language. They don't know what your baby wants. And what I always try to tell people too is, like, you in a daycare facility, these people are just like making minimum wage. You're not. Some places you're lucky enough to have somebody who does have, you know, like a degree in child development or something like that, or maybe the boss person does. But the little people that are working in the rooms with the babies, they might not have a lot of training in any. No,
and there's like
stuff.
A whole bunch of babies there.
Yeah.
And they have like one way of doing things, and they have all these different babies. And the one of the, you know, the first thing that they're going to decide when a baby is fussy is that they're hungry.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, oh, this baby's hungry. This baby needs a bottle. We just need to like sedate all these babies with food so that they'll be quiet. But as we know, babies fuss for, you know, a million different other reasons, but they don't necessarily go through each checklist with each baby. They're going to pull that food out really quickly. And they're also not going to probably be using pace bottle feeding. And so there's going to be a lot of overfeeding.
Yeah.
And maybe some difficulty breastfeeding, because like we were talking in the other episode, in our last episode, you know, the baby's not going to necessarily nurse very well after being super full all day.
Right. And there are some, like, it's funny, in my group, my little breastfeeding boot camp group, we have one mom who's like, I really love my daycare. They're really great. They listen to me. They give me updates when I need them. I tell them what to do and they do it for me. Like, they're really great. They're really great. I love them. And then we have one mom that, like, quit her job to stay home because her daycare was so terrible. I mean, COVID also happened at the same time, but it wasn't helpful that her daycare was so bad with her baby. And she was not one to like let them roll over her. Like she was very much like brought them the video on pace bottle feeding, told them exactly what to do. Her baby happened to be just a fussier baby. And that was just her temperament. Like we knew that going in, that was her temperament. And they were like, she's hungry. And she's like, no, she's just doesn't like you. That's why she's fussy. like she actually said that to them. She's like, she doesn't like you. But it got to the point where then they would just if her baby took a nap, they would just let her sleep all day. And because they were just like, well, she's being quiet. So she slept all. And they'd be like, well, she's fussy. And she goes, and then I looked on the log sheet that they sent me and they hadn't changed a diaper in several hours. And, so maybe they should change a diaper before telling me that she's hungry. It was a constant battle with her. And those are the two, those are very extreme situations, it just, I don't think I'd heard of a daycare that was actually that bad.
That's really sad.
But, and this person, like I said, that she was one to really be vocal too. So God only knows what they were doing to the parents that weren't saying anything. But, it was, and they're a lot of money. It was a daycare center. So it was a lot of money for her to be putting in there. And they were just like really awful. There was one situation, I think there was one time and there was constant staff turnover too, which was another like red flag when there's all that constant staff turnover. Yeah. And she said there was one time where there was like somebody that was working in the room with the babies. And the only reason she was working in the room with the babies was because her own baby was in the daycare. And but she was supposed to work in a different place in the daycare, which had nothing to do with babies, but they were shorthanded. So they just pulled her in. And was like, hey, can you just sit in this room today? And she was like, okay. So when my client asked her something, she was just like, I don't know. This really isn't where I work. But, kind of thing. I know it was. So like, those are the kind of things that you want to look out for. You want to look out for that staff turnover, all the time. If that's a situation that's going on in your daycare, you want to be like, all right, what's happening here? Why do I have a different worker in the infant room? Every other week, there's somebody different here. Like you want your baby to get to know who they're with. Yeah. That's why. It's not like, okay, they just are bad at, they're bad employers. No, we want your baby to connect with somebody. That's a really important piece of them being happy where they are. They need to connect with their caregiver.
Yeah.
But you have stories, right?
Yeah. Let me read some stories. Okay, our first story. My exclusively breastfed little one has been in daycare for 4 weeks. He recently had 2 days where he had 4 bottles with 4 ounces each over the course of the day, and they're now asking me to send in more milk per bottle. He usually only has 3 bottles while he's there. I just send the extra 4th bottle just in case. I upped his bottles by a half an ounce extra, but I can't really do more than that at the moment unless I can find another time to pump. I pump 3 times during work currently. Hoping this was just a fluke or a growth spurt, otherwise I'm not sure how I'll keep up. I have a decent stash because most days I pump 4 to 6 ounces more than he needs, but if he sticks to 4 bottles going forward, I'll barely make enough. So he's getting 4, so now he's up to 4 bottles with 4 ounces each. 4 ounces or 4.5 ounces. That is overfeeding. And this is what we're talking about.
Overfeeding. Yeah. I had a mom that contacted me recently because she thought she needed help with her supply. And I think I texted you about this one. The baby was getting like 15 ounces before noon or something like that.
Crazy amount of milk.
It was ridiculous. And I was like, no, that's too much. We can't. No, that's too much milk. And she was just like, oh my God. Like she was so relieved. She was so relieved because she's like, I don't know what I'm doing here because I can't keep up. And it's like, no, that's ridiculous. But babies, this is important. Okay. When we're looking at how much milk your baby's getting in a day, first of all, we usually kind of a rough guesstimate is like an ounce an hour. If your baby's gone for 8 hours from you, they shouldn't be getting 16 ounces of milk.
Yeah.
That's too much. The other thing is babies overall in a day about 25 to 30 ounces for a full day. So if your baby's eating in the morning with you.
A full day, meaning 24 hours.
Correct.
Not just, from morning to nighttime when you go to sleep. The whole entire 24 hours.
So if they're getting half of that in 4 hours or 5 hours, they're not going to eat well when they're with you. Bottom line. Because then they're also eating before they go. You're trying to feed, they're eating overnight maybe, or maybe they're not eating overnight because they're getting too much during the daytime, which might tank your supply. Like there's so many variables that are going on here. But bottom line is babies do not need 16 ounces of milk in an 8-hour period of time. They're never going to do that with you. If they're home with you, they're not eating like that. They're not.
No.
It's too much. That's a lot of milk.
Here's another story. My second baby was at daycare at 12 weeks. One of the teachers constantly told me that I wasn't getting enough and I needed to bring more milk, even though he was drinking 24 to 30 ounces a day. At daycare?
Oh my God.
I don't know if it's at daycare or the whole day. It sounds like it's at daycare. I was literally only making exactly what he was drinking and did not have a freezer stash. So it was really hard to hear that I wasn't producing enough every day. My husband was a huge help in helping me get over this mental hurdle by constantly telling me to remember what the lactation specialist said, that I was making enough and my breast milk changes to meet my baby's needs. We were surviving. Then the formula shortage happened and felt extreme anxiety over not being able to feed my baby. I was fine nursing at home, but could get almost nothing out during pumping at school. One of my coworkers suggested that I use a manual pump rather than an electric pump, and I began to produce way better and produce better. Producing better took away my anxiety because I was able to build a very small freezer stash. Me and my baby nursed until 18 months. Sending an infant to daycare sucks, period. And mentally exhausting. I wish America had better maternity leave. Yes. Yeah, that's another thing is daycares will say like, well, your baby is this age now, so now you need to be bringing in more.
Oh, because I had that come up recently. Yeah. That's like, no, they don't need that. I had that come up with a parent researcher. Like, I thought, that they were saying that the baby needs like 8 ounces now that they're this age. And I'm like, no. That's only a formula thing. That's not a breastfed thing.
Yeah, because the milk knows how old your baby is and will change to meet the baby's needs with the same amount. Mm-hmm. But the formula just has the amount that it has in it. And so you have to increase the baby's intake.
Correct.
But so if they don't know this, they're going to be asking you to bring in more milk than is like humanly possible to make.
Yes. Remember, it is not the norm in the United States for breastfeeding to last a long time. So we often see that big drop in breastfeeding happening around that 3-month mark because that's when a lot of parents go back to work. So a lot of daycare centers, pediatrician offices, things like that aren't as up on their breastfeeding information as your baby gets older because they just don't see it as much.
Yeah.
They don't see it as much. And I have a lot of people like ask your daycare provider, how many babies in here are still getting breast milk? And you might be the only baby.
Yeah.
Because it is not as common and their knowledge base is around formula. It is not around breastfeeding. So use the opportunity to educate them on this. I mean, you're paying them a lot of money for your baby to go there. So educate them on it and, so that they know because they might not have any knowledge at all on what to do with your baby because they're breastfeeding. I mean, that's not necessarily their fault. That's kind of a societal thing, but.
Right. That's true. Should we take a break and then we'll come back with more stories?
Yes,
okay, we'll be right back.
Time.
Today's episode is brought to you by Rumble Tough. The Rumble Tough Breeze is a top-of-the-line breast pump with rechargeable battery that fits in the palm of your hand. The powerful motor lasts 2,000 plus hours and has a 2-year warranty. The memory button allows you to record your most effective pumping session and recall it every time you wish. Combine the Breeze with the Rumble Tough Go Cups and you're pumping hands-free and on the go. Every Rumble Tough pump user qualifies for free pumping support with an IBCLC. Because they care, each pump comes with a manual handle kit to convert your electric pump into a manual pump at no cost. You shouldn't have to figure it out alone. Let the experts help you get the support you deserve. Additionally, every pump box includes a flange fit ruler so you can decide which of the 15 flanges they offer will fit you best. Nipple size does matter. Check out the entire line at rumbletuff.com. That's RUMBLETUFF.com and use code BADASS for 20% off of your purchase. And today's episode is also brought to you by Milkify. Milkify is the concierge breast milk freeze drying service that transforms your frozen milk into convenient pouches of powder that last for 3 years on the shelf. Milkify's patent-pending contact-free process allows them to safely freeze-dry each bag of milk individually without ever touching your milk. That means each bag of frozen milk will become its own pouch of powder, and Milkify will even save any notes you wrote on your bags and print them onto the pouches. To make a bottle, just add water or sprinkle onto solid foods for a nutritional boost. Research shows that freeze-drying retains the nutrients, probiotics, and immune factors in your milk and can help remove the bad taste from high lipase milk. Freeze-drying with Milkify not only helps you take back your freezer and extends the life of your stash, it can also help with travel, moving, or going back to work. Send them a message on Instagram and follow their Instagram too. They show kind of how they show the process there, and it's really cool.
Yeah, that is cool.
And you can check them out on their website at milkify.me. That's MILKIFY.me. And mention code BADASS for $25 off your first order. And you can find all of our sponsors and their promo codes in the show notes under this episode, wherever you're listening from. Or you can head to badassbreastfeedingpodcast.com and check there. And you'll also find all of our other episodes and information about scheduling your very own one-on-one online lactation consultation with Dianne.
All right, what else you got?
All right, let me see my
stories.
Okay. My little one goes to daycare and I pump 3 times while I'm at work. I get asked to put a few more ounces in his bottle all the time. A few more ounces. I mean, people say it like it's nothing.
I know.
I started
just add a few more ounces there.
Yeah, just a few more. By the way, a few is like a whole feeding.
Right.
I started adding more and we are up to 3 bottles at 5.5 ounces each.
Oh my God.
I absolutely hate pumping. So the thought of pumping more in a day makes me cringe. I've told them I just cannot make any more. And it usually helps for a week, but then they start bugging me again. I honestly have just started ignoring them because I just don't think they understand how much work a few ounces is.
They don't need it.
They don't need that either. Yeah. Here's another one. I have to send exactly what is needed or else it will all be used every time and I make exactly enough for my baby so I don't have the wiggle room to send extra every day. And I think that's what you need to do. You can't be like, oh, here's a little extra just in case, because it'll just be used because it's not needed. Just in case what?
Yeah.
There's no just in case. Just send what is needed. And you have to, you got to just, it's really a frustrating situation to be constantly bothered for more ounces when this is not how it works. This is not how it works, meaning, remember how we got the feedback of where you said that's not how it works?
Yeah.
So I think we've explained it. Like, this is not how your baby does not need more milk. The amount does not change. You're overfeeding them at that point.
Yeah. And this is what we mean by they don't know your baby's cues. Because they don't know your baby's cues. They don't know that if they're fussy, that could mean something different. They're bored. They miss their mother. They are,
It's probably bright and loud and cold and they have a wet diaper they haven't changed in 4 hours.
They're overstimulated. They're, maybe there's a new person in their room that day. There's a lot happening. Sometimes I'll get people that will message me about this and I'll be like, well, when did you go back to work? And they're like, well, this is my 3rd day. This is a baby that's like, where the hell is my mother? And that sounds cruel to say because I'm sure you don't want to leave your baby either.
No,
it's traumatizing for everybody involved. And that's what I try to tell tell parents, it's like, this is really hard on you and it's really hard on your baby. Like, it's a difficult transition. So of course they're going to be fussier. It's not more milk. I had one person say one time, that's not the answer. And I had one person say one time, I don't understand why the minute I left the house and the baby needed a bottle, or the minute I left the baby with somebody else, all of a sudden that's the day they decided they wanted to have more milk. That's the day that they needed more volume, right? That's just magically the same day that I left was the day that they needed more volume. No, that's not what's happening. They are there. It is something else. I mean, yes, I'm sure they are hungry part of the time, but they're not like having this huge hungry, growth spurt and need 3 more ounces more per bottle than what they typically would get.
No way.
No, we have to look at all the things, and they don't know your baby. So you really need to tell, like, this is not what the baby needs. The baby needs something different.
Yeah. I mean, and like I said before, this is their go-to, the feeding is just, here, they're fussy. Oh, they're hungry.
Yeah. It is their go-to. They don't know.
No. Here's another. My husband and I were able to work our schedules to only need childcare 3 days a week. Luckily, both sets of grandparents are local and they watch him the days we were both working. Some were very receptive on how much and how to feed the boy, while others were convinced I was not sending enough and were burning through my freezer stash. They once fed him 8 ounces over the course of 1.5 hours.
Oh my God.
However, all were very supportive of me wanting to nurse, even though they didn't always understand the mechanics and the needs, and would bring my boy during my lunch breaks so I could have one less pumping session, as I always respond better to nursing, and would actually receive more in the afternoon pump if I nursed at lunch than if I pumped at lunch. We're at 15 months and still going strong. Angela says, lots of pumping while driving. That's something that Dianne hates, but is something that, of course, we all know it's like, might as well use that time, right?
Yeah, I don't hate it. I don't want people to think I hate it and that you're doing something wrong. I hate it because a lot of times people promote that, as like, oh yeah, pump when you're driving. That's great. It's like, why do we have to be such multitaskers? Like, it's just awful that we have to put ourselves in I hate the situation.
No, we're mad at society about this, not you for doing it. We understand
I hate
that's
the situation.
Like probably the most convenient way to get a pumping session in, but it's just so sad that we have to be doing these things, that you can't just drive a car and that's what you're doing.
Pump at the same time. Like, that's,
it's wild. Angela says, lots of pumping while driving. I already said that. And working to keep supply up for the grandmas to feed the babies. I had a long commute and a hands-free pumping bra. Taught them pace bottle feeding and always used a slow flow nipple. My mother-in-law kept extensive records of when and how much they ate. My oldest preferred the bottle, ended up exclusively pumping for a year. My second would still nurse at night. It was difficult, but it was worth it. And I think this is so typical. Is that, we run into issues, and maybe if we got a lactation consultant, if we got an occupational therapist involved, if we did all of these interventions, maybe things would have been different. Maybe not. But sometimes we don't have time for all of this. Where you get into a routine. Yeah, you get into a routine. You're already working 40 hours a week or whatever, and you're doing all of this stuff. It's like, you just you find a groove. Maybe it's not the one you wanted, but it's it's easier than just switching things up.
Like, how are you supposed to do all the things?
Yeah. How are you supposed to do all of these things? Here's a job. Here's a newborn baby. Do all these things. Also, you need to contact this person and that person and this person and schedule these appointments. I mean, we homeschool. And my kids have appointments around. And I feel like all I do is drive around all day. And they don't even go to school.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah. And then people that go to work and they send their kids to school, and then you have to schedule all these appointments. And I don't know how you do it. I just don't know. I mean, obviously I have the privilege of being able to stay home and have this life. But when I think about the other life, I'm like, we would need to up my meds.
It's a lot. It's a lot. I mean, in all these appointment places, they're only open during
exactly
work hours.
Right.
So it's like, how are you supposed to do a job? How are you supposed to work a job?
I know. Yeah. It's just really wild. It's really wild that we can't just simply give people a year off.
Oh,
It's
God.
so unbelievable that we can't just give people a year off.
I know. And it's always going to go back to that, you know?
It is, because that's the problem. That's why all
It
of this
is.
exists.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Brittany says, my parents have watched my son for 1 to 2 hour increments a handful of times. I would always send 2 to 4 ounce packs of breast milk, but ask them to use the bare minimum, if any, since they weren't keeping him long and I would need to nurse by the time I returned to him. Almost every single time they would give him the maximum amount and claim he was starving. My parents did this. I didn't leave my kids very often because I didn't work and I just didn't need to. But Josh and I went out one time when Jack was still a baby, and I was working really hard and like pumping and putting the milk in the refrigerator, and there were like 3 full bottles of milk in there. And I was like, I said like before we left, like, oh, you can give him a bottle, like if he needs it, whatever. I came back, they gave all 3 bottles. We weren't gone that long, couple hours maybe. They gave him 3 bottles. We decided to walk. I don't remember. I put him in the carrier and we started walking somewhere, and he was just spitting up on my chest.
Oh my God.
I was like, yeah. They're like, yeah, he drank all 3. Okay.
And everybody's happy about
It was shocking. I was like, oh my God. If you look at 3 bottles of milk, the volume is like their entire torso.
Yeah. Like, where are they putting it?
It was just like up his esophagus.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Oh, poor kid.
Okay. We have a patron actually who said anywhere from 2 to 5. I asked her how often she's pumped. We started a conversation. I was asking her how much she pumps, and then it got interesting. She said, I pump anywhere for 2 to 5 ounces. That's between 2. Oh, wait. Is it 2 to 5 ounces or 2 to 5 hours? Anyway, I'll just move on. Baby's 7 months. Yesterday, I pumped like most was 3. I pumped at 6:45, 11, 1, 3, and 5:30.
Wow.
In total, it was like 14 and a half ounces. I go like 3 to 2.5. Okay, wait a minute. I don't remember what was happening in this conversation. I'm going to move on. I feel like it's getting confusing with the numbers. So I'm going to go to this one. First off, I love the podcast. It's gotten me through some tough times breastfeeding. My little one is 8 months old and is still exclusively breastfeeding. I wanted to ask if you have any suggestions for providing enough milk for daycare. My son started solids, but still is mainly breastfeeding, but I have to pump while I'm away at work. The teachers keep telling me the bottles I have been making are not enough and aren't filling him up. I pump while at work, about 3 ounces each session. Each bottle, he gets 3 bottles at daycare, 5 ounces each bottle. Do you have any suggestions? I don't think my supply has gone down. So that's the same. It's just the same nonsense.
Yeah.
It's the same story from everyone. Is the overfeeding, which I know isn't the case for everyone, but when there are issues, that's usually what it is.
Yeah, that's usually, yeah.
What was the issue? We did a Patreon hangout yesterday with one of our patrons, and she had some daycare situations that weren't necessarily overfeeding.
No, she had the high lipase in her milk.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah, she had high lipase in her milk and didn't realize it until she was pulling milk out of the freezer when her baby went to daycare. So she'd been freezing her stash, and then when she started pulling from that freezer stash, she realized, so she had to pump fresh every day, which isn't the worst thing in the world, but it was, she wasn't expecting to have to do that.
Yeah.
And sometimes, trying to keep up with that can be hard, but it's great if you can give, fresh milk all the time. But that was her biggest issue, was that. And she had an in-home daycare that was good with not overfeeding. So they were really good with that.
Right.
Which was helpful.
Yeah. So some tips. just send what you need. Just send what the baby's going to need. Don't send extra. There's no just in case. Just in case
No.
what? It's not a thing. I know we're very wired to like think the worst, but you just send what you need.
And you don't want your baby to be hungry, right? And people are like, your baby's starving. But we need to think about it logically. Right. They're not. One of the things that I recommended with the person that contacted me, who they were giving like 15 ounces like before noon. One of the things that I said was, if they think your baby is hungry all the time, to give 2 ounces every 2 hours. Just feed them more frequently, small amounts. And you'll end up giving less, overall. If you're just giving, feeding more frequently, a couple of ounces every 2 hours.
Yeah.
And that's it. But if they are like, oh my gosh, no, your baby's starving, every 5, we'll give them 5 ounces and then they're immediately hungry afterwards. Babies also like to suck. Think about what your breastfeeding relationship is like, right? Babies, they latch, they nurse, they suck a little bit, then they eat a little bit, they suck a little bit, and they're cozy and they're snuggled. They're missing all of that, right? Like they're missing all of that. So sometimes they need that little suck time, and then they're sucking down a bottle with, pretty quickly if they're not doing paced bottle feeding. They need that time to suck, to soothe. So tell them to give their baby a pacifier after they have their bottle, because that can help them to, kind of have that suck time and have that digestion time. And, just, they might not need more food. They might need more attention.
Yes, that's the thing. They might just want to be held.
Yeah, they really might.
They definitely want to be held.
Mm-hmm.
That's
they
going
need to be snuggled. Yeah, they're getting all of that with you. So, and if this is a, like a grandparent or a family member, they'll love that, like doing. And that's one of the things with encouraging paced bottle feeding. If you have an in-home daycare and they have the time and they're not giving you any pushback, or you have a grandparent or a family member, I'd be like, this is how you can connect with the baby better. Doing that paced bottle feeding, you get to interact with the baby more. You get to stop and have some eye-to-eye contact and talk with them a little bit while you're feeding them and doing all that stuff. You're not just giving them a bottle just because it's your work to do. It's your job. It's the time. It's time. Give them a bottle,
right.
Like how they do. Like that's how daycare centers can be. Sometimes they're very regimented schedules. So it might, being able to do that paced bottle feeding with your baby is going to be time that they can connect with your baby and learn them a little bit better too, because that's what it's about. It's learning their cues. They don't know them. They don't know your cues. Even like research, I did a presentation once with like a WIC group or something like that. I can't remember. It was like a breastfeeding coalition, and it was about like introducing bottles and going to daycare. And one of the research studies that I found showed that even when babies received a bottle from their mother, they were not being overfed, because mothers know the cues. But when somebody else gives a bottle, they don't know the cues. So they end up being overfed more frequently. So it's very, very different, knowing your baby's cues, and they just don't know that yet. And they need that time to figure it out. But they also need you to tell them what to do.
Yeah. And
don't
then
assume they know.
Right. And have them not feed the baby like right before you're going to pick them up.
That's the other thing. I always recommend that too. I'd be like, if you're picking your baby up at 4, tell them, do not feed the baby past 2 p.m. If you're picking your baby up at 4 o'clock, or if you're picking your baby up at 5, 3 p.m., whatever, but do not feed the baby within 2 hours if you're picking them up. That way you can get them home and you can feed them. But they do not, no, they should not be feeding your baby right before. Otherwise, you got to go home and pump. And that's where we run into that continuous bottle situation, continuous pumping and bottling.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for listening.
Thank you. Good luck.
Bye.
Bye.